Hi everyone, my name is Herkeph and today we'll be starting our third and most likely final attempt at an incredibly stupid, hardcore world where we're only allowed to use wooden tools and leather armor. In the last two attempts at this challenge, I have managed to do quite a lot, including building mega bases, automated farms, and so on. However, in both cases, I died in incredibly stupid and anticlimactic ways, which will be something I will attempt to avoid this time. So I created my third world with the incredibly stupid rule of only using wooden tools and leather armor. Once the patience game of waiting for the world to load had finished, I found myself right next to a village, which was an incredibly good start. So like any kind-hearted and gentle man would do, I started breaking into the homes of some innocent civilians to steal all of their hard-earned resources as well as some beds. I then took a brief break from the looting and decided to punch my very first tree of this world. I then went on to craft my very first wooden tools. I decided to go with an axe and a pickaxe, since you always need a pickaxe, and I made the axe to go on with the next task of killing off the village's only protection from the horrific monsters that haunts them during the night. This because it is in our financial interest. So I provoked the iron golem of the village and pillared up on some dirt so that it couldn't fight back as I bullied it. However, he was rather cheap as he only gave me 3 iron ingots, which was rather disappointing. But after I had bullied the local golem, I decided to also steal the produce that the village had produced. So I crafted myself a wooden hoe and got to work looting once more. I then set off to find yet another village, since the cheap bastard of an iron golem only dropped 3 pieces of iron, and in order to safely go to the Nether, we needed 4 pieces. Quite luckily, I did manage to find another village a bit further away from spawn, which was very nice. But not only did we find a village, but a lava pool as well, meaning we could start constructing our very first Nether portal. And once the portal was constructed, I got onto looting the next village as well as bullying their iron golem. I then went on to murder all animals I could see to get my hands on even more food, as a stack and a half of hay bales simply wasn't enough for some reason. When we had collected a decent amount of food, I decided that it was time to go through to the Nether. So I went through the portal and unfortunately found myself in my least favorite biome, as it's the home of both variants of aggressive deformed pigs. Then began the incredibly long and painful exploration mission to find a Nether fortress, though I rather quickly ran into a bastion, because of course I did, since we always seem to find bastions when we're looking for fortresses and fortresses when we're looking for bastions. But whilst we were looking for a fortress, I decided that it might be a good idea to grab as much gold as possible, since we can use it to level up clerics as well as golden apples for when we want to cure villagers. I was then brutally assaulted by a ghast when I was in a soul sand valley, which almost ended my whole career, but thankfully I was just barely able to survive. And after an incredibly painful and long journey through the Nether, I found myself yet another bastion, which was rather frustrating. But after an even longer and more painful journey, we finally managed to find ourselves a Nether fortress. So I instantly started collecting as many blaze rods as I could, but since I am very bad at this game, I almost died. But putting my gaming skills, or rather the lack thereof, I did manage to get myself enough blaze rods to get to the end. So I then began looting the fortress, most likely in the hopes of finding a job in this current labour market. But unfortunately, I left the Nether fortress still very much unemployed, but putting my employment situation aside, I started making my way back to my portal, and whilst on my way, I decided to risk my life on a 4-block jump over lava for absolutely no reason at all. But other than that, the journey back wasn't too bad, since I actually knew where to go and didn't have to wander around like a headless chicken. And once I had successfully made it back to the overworld, I went back to the village where we first spawned. I then threw all of my random junk into a chest and started trading the wheat that I had stolen from them earlier. But after a while, the villagers stopped working for the day, which was rather rude. So I left my bucket of water to destroy their livelihood and grabbed myself a bucket of lava, which I, in turn, used to give the local wildlife a very unpleasant ending. And when the night came, I started killing as many creepers as I could, since we're going to need some rockets for when we get our Elytra. However, once the day came, I realized that we didn't get enough emeralds from trading our stolen goods, so I had to trade some sticks to a Fletcher, though this wasn't that big of a problem since we needed a Fletcher anyway, since it might be a good idea to have a bow and some arrows when we go to the end. But once all trades had been successfully dealt with, I decided to set off to find the stronghold. Though as I left the village, I noticed that there was a pillager patrol right next to the village, but I rather quickly decided that it wasn't my problem and continued on my way. However, once I had arrived at the place the eyes had led me, I realized that the stronghold was under the ocean, which was rather annoying. But nonetheless, I started digging, and after not too much digging, I arrived at the stronghold, meaning the next objective was to find the portal, which is usually a bit of a pain. And this time was no different, as I spent 6 minutes running through a dank basement to find the damn portal. I know 6 minutes doesn't sound like a very long time, but I happened to have the patience of a grumpy toddler on a plane. So I once again placed down a chest and threw all of my random junk that I wouldn't need for the dragon fight, and set my spawn using one of the beds that I had stolen from the village at our spawn. I then thought that it might be a good idea to craft some armor, so I used the leather that we had acquired in a very humane and ethical way on our way to the stronghold. However, I then realized that I had used my bucket to pick up lava, which wasn't going to be that useful in the end, so I ran off and grabbed some water instead. Then all the preparations were done, and I jumped through to the end, only to be faced with the incredibly fun and engaging task of slowly mining endstone with an unenchanted wooden pickaxe. But eventually, I made it out of the pit that we spawned in, and started the dragon fight. And once the dragon had been rather epically dealt with, I decided to steal the dragon egg to make a lamp or something in the future. I then wasted no time at all and made my way through the portal that we had just unlocked. I then set my FOV to Quake Pro and managed to spot 2 end cities, but neither of them seemed to have a ship, which was rather disappointing. And since the end cities had no ship, I decided to activate my second brain cell and came to the conclusion that I shouldn't risk my life unless there's an Elytra. So I decided to only take out the shulkers by the entrances and left to find an end city with a ship. And after a rather long but not too long adventure, I did manage to find an end city that had a ship, which was very exciting. So I pillared my way over and grabbed myself the very first pair of wings in this world. And since I am a very greedy man, I decided that I would continue my adventure in the end and went on to raid a bunch of end cities. And after my immense greed had been somewhat satiated, I decided to return back to the overworld. And once I was back, I located the libraries and grabbed all the books I could get my slimy and greedy hands on. And once I had my pockets full of stolen goods, I jumped back to the end and went back to my spawn. Now came the task of exploring the overworld, as I needed somewhere I could settle down and build my starter base. I did, however, have some requirements since I am a very picky person. My main requirements was that there has to be a pillager outpost near the place I am settling down, and there also has to be an ocean. The reason for this is quite simple. Since I am incredibly bad at this game, I tend to die rather often and in rather embarrassing ways, so my only hope of making it to a somewhat respectable playtime in this world. I'm going to need a bunch of totems of undying, so I need to build a raid farm soon. However, shortly after I had started looking for such a place, my Elytra broke mid-flight, which in normal circumstances would have led to my very swift death, but for some miraculous reason, it decided to break when I wasn't very high up, leading to my rather surprising survival. And after flying for a rather long time, I found myself the first pillager outpost of this world. However, it was located in a cold biome, so all the nearby water was frozen, which wasn't going to work for me. So I continued flying and found another one quite nearby, and this one actually had some scarecrows, which was very nice. I decided to rush in and loot the pillager outpost, as they had a horn, which I instantly used to establish my dominance as the alpha male. I also stole their carved pumpkins, since we're most definitely going to need them in the future, and once I had stolen all of the pillager stuff, I noticed that the outpost had both a normal ocean as well as a village nearby, meaning that we had finally found the place where we were going to settle down in the early game. But that is about all that we have time for in this episode, so there we have it. The first episode of my third incredibly stupid hardcore world. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you in the next one.